I was raised with a Black African grandfather. He was my dad's stepfather. Yet he was the only father in my dad's life. My dad is white. My mum is Asian.
How was it like as a kid growing up with a West African grandfather in such a mixed family?
I was heavily influenced by Ghanaian culture. I had a grandfather at home who I sometimes clashed with, and I would be firmly reminded that, Hakim, you are playing too much computer. You need to study more. Why do you want to spend time outside? You're a child. You should not be walking around in the street. This is not good. For the first 10 years of my life, that was the kind of cultural clash. However, at home, I was already used to eating curries with the spicy Pakistani food. But I was also used to eating even spicier Ghanaian food, such as fufu, and we call it ground rice. So I know that in Togo and in French, they have other names for this, so we can show that up on the screen. But we were eating these very spicy chicken stew, beef stew, of course, jollof rice, which I don't want to start any wars here, but the Ghanaian jollof rice is what I grew up with, maybe better than the Nigerians. Gari peanut stew. That was one of my favorite. Spicy fish, and hearing the languages as well. Jack, eteseng.
Yeah.
I heard all these different accents. He spoke a variety of different Ghanaian languages. My mum speaking Punjabi. And then my nan, you don't have to study, let's just watch a film. And then my granddad saying, hey, don't let him watch all these films. Hakim, go and pass me my shoe now. And I hadn't been used to being spoken in such a kind of direct, orderly way like that. So when I was very young, it was hard. And there was back and forth and we would, I guess, argue. But then as I got into secondary school, our bond strengthened so much. I had problems with teachers. Most people now know me as, the guy, he just worked for the UN. He graduated from, he has 2 degrees, university. They assumed that I was this born academic. When in reality, I struggled a lot. And I would come home and vent. I don't need to study. The teachers are blah, blah, blah. And he would say, Hakim, you do not do this for the teachers. You need to study for yourself, for your future. It was such a pivotal moment in my life where if I hadn't listened to him there, I don't know where I would be now. Yeah, having these role models, positive Black male role models in my life who were completely against what we were seeing on the media. Unfortunately, let's say the media narrative was portraying growing up that Black equals hip-hop, violence, all Hollywood movies were showing Black people as, it was mainly African Americans, I guess we were seeing. But even on the TV in the UK, there's always kind of crime and negativity associated with Blackness. But then at home, I had these educated, very positive, disciplined role models in my life who showed me that all of that stuff was rubbish. And there's a huge distinction that I think people need to make between Black and African as well. Africa is a huge continent with a wide variety of cultures and linguistic diversity, appearance. There are a lot of people in Africa who look like me and people who look like you as well, Jack. So again, this whole kind of narrative that BAME, they call it in the UK, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, that we're all just clumped together. It just doesn't make sense. And a lot of the comments on our videos about Africa have been reminding us that when we say African, actually Africa is a huge continent. And there are very similar values of respect and discipline. And that translates into, I think, as we proceed in this discussion, it influenced me in a variety of areas. He was a Christian man, but would go to the mosque. He said they would teach him how to read and write in Arabic. And he would also fast with them during Ramadan. And I grew up again with those values of, okay, granddad, you're Christian. This part of my family is Muslim. But respect is the most important thing always. He would say to me, I don't understand why in England people need to fight. In Ghana, Eid and Christmas, they are both public, national holidays. And on Eid, if there's food being shared around, they're not going to say no. It's something that I didn't believe was possible until I then went to Reunion Island later on in my life, which we did a whole video on. So there was that crossover there. Despite looking different to a lot of my family members on all sides, I never really felt that kind of marginalization or I never felt that with my African family.
That's fascinating. And actually, could you go a bit more into that? I'd like to know, how did your African family receive you?
So being half white, half Asian, there were times where around white people, as Matthias said in our episode on being half Korean, you do feel slightly like the outsider sometimes, especially with people who are very proud. And of course, with Pakistanis, it was very evident. I don't speak the language well. I wasn't as aware of certain cultural practices, that I was the Gora. So with the whites, I was the Asian, or other words that I'm not going to say. And with the Pakistanis, I was always the Gora, which means the white man. So I was very sensitive from a young age about those differences and being seen as an other. Yet with my African family, I never actually felt that I was treated differently, which is crazy because, of course, at certain functions, people might double take and like see me and my dad and my brother and mom and see like, wow, okay, they look a bit different. But we were always introduced as, that's Reggie's family. That's Reggie's grandson. It's Reggie's grandson. Oh, it was always very, very, very welcoming. My dad was always introduced as Reggie's son. Always. To the point, to exemplify this, that my dad, a white man, was often the chairman of events for the Ghanaian, South London and Peckham committees and events, because he was my granddad's son. So I was always raised with that respect for the different cultures, but I was always respected back. And that's why I do feel extremely comfortable with all of my family from Ghana. And yeah, I can't wait to visit there as soon as possible as well, because that's one thing that, I visited Pakistan for the first time 2 years ago, but there's a hole in my heart that can only be filled by going back to Ghana. Since my grandfather passed away, for a few years, I kind of, as a coping mechanism, I think, I kind of pushed that side of things away, because even just hearing the accent or some music, anything that associated with Ghana, it would trigger me, my dad. Not always in a bad way, but we'd be in London and you would hear an African man on the phone, and suddenly we're brought back to my childhood, and which is a beautiful thing, but also it was hard at the start. But thanks to Evolve, meeting these Africans and sharing these stories has really got me back in touch with my African side, which, yeah, for sure, I've never claimed to be an African. But all I can do is be grateful to what Africa, Ghana, West Africans have given me. The blessing of this respect and openness and appreciation for life. My grandfather, when he was in his 70s, would walk into a room. He was a very stern man sometimes, as I said, very strict. Hakim, you need to be quiet. I'm trying to watch the news. I remember that side of him. But then an hour later, he would come downstairs and the mood would be very serious. And he would just get up and start dancing. And just, I realized Africans never need the reason to dance. It was just that appreciation for life. And one of his quotes that my brother and I always reminisce about is, I can't even remember the context. He was just talking about politics or something. And he just said, Ghana is a very, very strong country. It comes back to his pride for his motherland. That in 1957, he was there with his best friend, my Uncle Nat. And he was celebrating the independence and the formation of Ghana in Accra. And apparently they had too much fun that night. I think a lot of alcohol was consumed. But to link it to, again, my childhood, is that he never said you shouldn't drink alcohol. But he explained to me that, alcohol can bring very, very bad things to people. I'm not telling you not to drink. But Hakim, I want you to understand that alcohol can cause a lot of problems. His advice for me was practical. There were things that he said. Even I remember when he knew that I was moving to London for university, he told me, Hakim, beware of the black boys. This was a man who was in the UK during the generation of no dogs, no Irish, no blacks, in that order. So this was a man who had obviously seen racism all around him. Even at a young age, he was at boarding school in Germany. Not long after World War II, in post-Nazi Germany, he said that he used to carry a can of tuna because if the police ask you, what's that? He goes, this is my dinner. But it could also double up as a pretty strong weapon as well to defend himself in a time that was obviously more racist. So despite growing up with that, in that environment and spending a lot of time in England, I never ever heard him complain about racism once. I remember him vividly saying to me, they want a reaction from you. If you give them the reaction, they have won. That's exactly what they want. When I was younger, I would get frustrated. People would say things about my family. It was either racist about being Asian or being fake black. Oh, why are you faking to be black? You're not even black. You're fake African, fake Jamaican. But they didn't see. At home, I was eating fufu, I don't know how more. It's not even about black. This was Ghana. At home, listening to the music, going to the events, sweat and tears on my face because the food was so spicy at these events. But that's it. It was a big part of my identity. And that's it. 30 years old, I don't drink alcohol anymore because I can still hear my granddad explaining to me, it's not that you shouldn't drink. You need to understand. Anytime I would worry and panic about anything, he had a very stern kind of stoic approach to just tell me, don't listen to them. Don't worry about that. Focus on yourself. That it took me a long time after he passed away to get a grip on myself. But always grateful for that. And after clashing at such a young age, to understand how necessary that discipline was in my life. So frustrated, but now eternally grateful for those lessons that unfortunately not everyone has. It's not about telling Ghanaians I'm one of you, but it's appreciating them and what they've done for me.
Yeah. To see that this West African culture played probably the predominant role in you actually becoming that disciplined man is it's amazing, man.
It was passed down to my father because my dad was from a white working class background. He was the first person in his family to go to university. In his area, university was unheard of. It was for the posh kids. Yet my grandfather, African man, he was educated. And education was one of the strongest, most important things that he valued. So he enabled my dad to have self-belief. A white working class man from a council estate, to believe that no, he could go to uni. And he did. He against all odds, was probably the first person in his school to ever go to a Russell Group University and went from the council estate to Bristol University. And my dad will give full credit to that, to his father, for explaining to him what is possible and not accepting just what's around you as like that doesn't have to determine where you're going to end up. It's not about, you can be proud of your roots, but also understand that there's always progression to be made as well.
My first childhood best friend was a Ghanaian, Mr. Ose. I just felt like his brother. That's the easiest way to say it. A testament to the true West African spirit of inclusivity and family values. As you grew up and you kind of left home, how was it interacting with other Black people? Did they always receive you in the same way? Did you always assume that they would have the same values as your grandfather?
In secondary school, I remember meeting some guys of Jamaican heritage and understanding that, okay, these guys are Black, but their cultural upbringing was completely different to the Ghanaian upbringing. And there were parallels between the South Asian culture and the West African culture, like the big focus on education and work ethic and discipline. And just when you analyze it, someone from Jamaica might be Black, but they are also influenced, like Jamaica's motto is out of many, one people. So there are Indian Jamaicans and Chinese Jamaicans, and it's just a very layered, unique culture as well, like the reunion culture. But I think a main thing that I observed from my dad from a young age is just he would always treat Black people with, unfortunately, because of the media narrative, there's a lot of fear. And I've felt fear based on how I look with the beard, as a South Asian, Middle Eastern-y looking man. And I know, because I've discussed this with my black friends, that they can sense. I mean, we're human. We can sense when people are scared of us based on media representations. Like, you haven't even spoken to them yet. But I know a lot of my black friends, I mean, I do this, will try and intentionally speak in a very soft and non-threatening way so people aren't intimidated. So even I didn't need to introduce myself as, hi, my name's Hakim. I have black family, be my friend. You know, it was never like that. But they could instantly, I think, just feel that, okay, this guy is not like the others who are like, nice to meet you, whatever. I felt almost the reverse. I felt a positive discrimination to black people because at home, the black people were my mentors, like Uncle David, you know, doing the bicep curl when I was 15 and he was so strong. And, you know, he was a scientist. So he helped me with his science. And my granddad was so smart, always encouraging debate at home. So very well spoken. So those, in my mind, it's like when I saw another black person, I would almost get too happy that, this is what I'm used to. And then in reality, it wasn't always, you know, everyone's different. That said, whenever I did interact with, especially West Africans, I had a lot of Nigerian friends at university, we clicked instantly. And I remember one of my Nigerian friends just saying to me, like, he started asking me questions. And then when he learned about my family, he was just like, now I understand why you're so comfortable with blacks. You know, but it made sense. But because the food that they were cooking at uni, I was used to eating and I loved. The music, I've always loved African music. And then when Afrobeats started to get popular in the UK, it does something to your spirit, you know, that if you're sad and you listen to Afrobeats, it's going to help your mood, you know? And that kind of spirit, dancing together with Africans, is one of the most incredible feelings that I have, as I still feel connected to that so much, to my grandfather, through the music. So yeah, it has been something that definitely I find it easier to connect with black people in general. We overcomplicate human relations. If you approach someone with respect, most of the time they'll give it back to you. And I've applied that, not just with African or black people. That's why I'm able to connect with Arabs. You know, we're in East Asia now. We're in Korea. We go to Japan, which apparently is a difficult, inclusive culture. But I've been able to get very close with the Japanese people, Thais, Latinos, based on copying and pasting this respect. When you have that, and that was taught by my granddad, you know, the way that he respected my Pakistani family, the white family, and of course, his fellow African family. When you use that respect, people are, of course, going to approach you in a warm way. And it's not based on the words you use. It's how you feel it. And I think you remember the West African handshake and what they do. Yeah, you know, I would take a lot of West Africans by surprise by shaking their hand and then doing that at the end. And it's those little things, you know. If you take those aspects of a culture and you learn, you know, those small cultural nuances and aspects, people are going to embrace you in. And that's why, you know, being mixed for me and having this mixed upbringing was the biggest blessing I could have ever asked for.
So let's rewind a little bit back to when you finished secondary school or high school. How did your grandfather's discipline help to propel you to where you are today?
He placed such a strong value in education, and I excelled academically to the point where I remember him when I was young. You know, he was an educated man. He was qualified. He had degrees. And I remember him speaking about the LSE, the London School of Economics and Political Science. Even as a young age, I remember him speaking about that university very proudly. That was actually the university where the founder of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, he studied there actually. So imagine from a young age, despite the house being on a council estate, hearing such pride and, you know, such a strong emphasis and importance placed on education. Of course, that trickled down onto how I valued education, especially if you combine that with the fact that in the Pakistani culture as well, there is a lot of competition over, oh, your son, where did he go to university? He went to UCL, but he went to Oxford, you know. It's kind of a lot of like that very, doctor, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, you got to be an engineer. There's always a huge part in the South Asian culture as well. During my undergraduate degree, shortly after doing my year abroad in Reunion Island, which again, I felt proud to show to my granddad, look, I've spent time in a country. It's not mainland Africa, but it's still, these are people of African origin. And we connected over that because I was the only other person in our close family who'd had an experience like that. But he passed away, which was very difficult for me to deal with, of course. And I mentioned that at that time, I had a little bit of distance from just the African culture. It was hard for me. We have the word kismet, which means destiny. Eventually, I applied to the LSE, and he never knew that I got in. And I hope he would have been very proud to know that. And I remember getting the acceptance letter and just uncontrollable. It was uncontrollable. I opened the letter of admission that I got into the LSE, and I just cried. Like tears just fell down my face because I know he would have been, so proud to see the kid who was fighting with the teachers, and getting sent out of the classes. But thanks to his discipline and guidance, I made it, to the London School of Economics, the same university where the founder of Ghana went to. It was a beautiful moment. And of course, I know he really valued these kind of government and things like that. And he never knew that I got into the UN as well, So I proudly wore a few times to the office some of my grandfather's actual old robes. They're actually his. And I wore them to the office proudly. It's, I guess, ironic a bit because there was a bit of banter between Ghana and Nigeria. The only country I really heard my grandfather speak about growing up was... And again, I love all my Nigerian brothers and sisters, but I know there's a rivalry like India and Pakistan as well. It turned out that my best friend at the LSE was a Nigerian guy who Jerry we're going to have on soon as well. So that's it. Thanks to Evolve now, getting in touch with that side again more has felt like a long lost friend. Has been like, what do they say, rekindled? Yeah, I never want to lose that connection to West Africa ever again. Because it's, never claiming to be African, but just really wanting to represent and share everything that Africa's given to me. And can't wait to go there with you as soon as possible, really, because that is something that has been on my mind for a long time. You've been in the house with someone since you were a kid, but you haven't been to that country yourself. So Ghana, it's time, very, very soon.
We're coming. Ghanaian viewers, give us some recommendations, help us out. And it will be nothing but a pleasure to go there and to experience this.
It is just nice with my brother sometimes. Again, we go to African restaurants in London. There is the first look when we go in and you kind of get like, they're not always used to people like us going in there. And then when we order and we're eating with our hand, I think then there's this kind of silent understanding, okay. So that's it. You connect to people in different ways. I got to give a lot of love to my younger brother because he cooks. My brother, who, again, we don't have that Ghanaian blood, but we have that Ghanaian soul at home still to this day. He cooks the Ghanaian stew. And you've tried this many times, right?
Yeah.
You walk at home and it smells like granddad's cooking, and that's our way to still connect to the culture, right? Eating that stew that is way spicier than the Pakistani stews. I've seen Jack, gasping for air, and sweating out.
It's the only reason why when we're in Korea now, and you always ask me, do you want spicy or not? And I'm like, spicy, because that stew trained me.
And that's the thing about accent and all of this is that you may have seen again on the episodes where I'm speaking French, they call it mirroring. But when I'm around West Africans or I'm around British Asians or whatever, my accent unconsciously will change. It might not be as native or natural as whatever, but language and accent is a big part of us. So yeah, every time I hear that West African accent, I can't help but smile and remember those beautiful moments as a kid being shouted at and being told off, but then also seeing the pride as I grew up and started to study hard. Those major lessons to stay away from drink and drugs and alcohol that really were incredible lessons for life. I guess my message to people would be that on the media, Black, Africa, you will see photos of suffering people. I mean, it's the same. Pakistan, I went there. There were people in poverty, of course, but there's so much more than that. So much more to a culture than people suffering and violence. I mean, this is what the media is programming us to believe. But really try and take a step back and go and see things with your own eyes and interact with people face to face, not based on what the media said. And you will really be able to see a completely different world that you didn't know existed.
So were there any special memories or anything you particularly remember about your granddad as a kid?
So I need the Ghanaians to tell me, but it seems like Ghana loves Arsenal Football Club. Because it seems like every single Ghanaian I meet is an Arsenal supporter, and there was no exception with my granddad as well. And every Sunday I'll go and watch Arsenal play. He, despite being in his 70s, he was so into the game that he would just start like jumping up and down out of his seat. Like when there was nearly a goal, he was very mobile. My favorite player now is Bukayo Saka, who is a Nigerian.
Okay.
But he was always happy, I think, to see the Ghanaian players especially, but all the Black players doing well. And yeah, it's a nice thing to see, football. He used to just tell me, you can enjoy football, when you work hard, enjoy the football, watch it, relax. So I think there's if we compare like Korea is this very intense lifestyle at the moment. My brain, I mean, I love Korea and I can really relate to Korean people. I'm quite similar, driven, work. But my granddad would always he had a strong work ethic as well, but he'd take me back sometimes and say, tomorrow is another day. And I think sometimes I need to hear that still in my mind, it's good to work hard, but you have to appreciate life and not burn out as well. So for those who don't know, Ghana was an ex-colony of the UK. And that's why, again, for those who don't know, that there are people of Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Nigerian, Ghanaian origin in the UK, because before we were part of the British Empire. And it's interesting to know that in my family, from the English side, I had soldiers. My great-grandfather was a soldier in World War II. From my Pakistani side of the family, we had soldiers, and I went back to my mum's village for the first time last year, and there were war medals. People in the family were proudly soldiers. The village, Jellum, is next to the garrison, as they called it, which would have been the ex-British military base. And also in my Ghanaian side of the family, they had soldiers during the war as well. So, there's often a divisive narrative, unfortunately now, when it comes to race relations in the UK, but we all were part of the British Empire, and many people of all colours sacrificed their lives for the UK. I think when we study that side of the history, we can have a shared gratitude for all of our brothers and sisters and ancestors who fought for us, despite not necessarily having the choice to do so.
Thank you for watching. If you made it to the end, please like and subscribe. Leave us a comment down below. We're so grateful for all of your support, and we look forward to giving you more valuable content.
That's it. See you next time.